Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is an item that we've talked about a couple of times at the Public Works Finance Committee. As I recall, it has not come to the full council, so I think it will be new to some of you. You may not have heard that. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the background as to what the situation is that we're trying to address with this proposal, and then carry it forward to the current alternative that is being suggested for consideration by the City Council. So to start with, the area we're looking at is the intersection of 6th and Jackson Street. Of course, Jackson running north-south here, State Highway 8, US 95, southbound, and then 6th Street running east-west. This is the URA property. That's part of the Legacy Crossing urban renewal area. This parking lot is becoming the new Jimmy John's restaurant that's currently under construction. So the item of concern here has to do with the configuration of the intersection, primarily in the east-west direction. And the issue that we have existing today is that the eastbound through lane, so this lane here, is directly opposite of the westbound left turn lane. That is an unusual situation, and one that as a traffic designer, a roadway designer, you do not want to have. It leads to a lot of potential for conflict in vehicles traveling in opposing directions. Part of that can occur just from a vehicle here working its way across, while the one that also has a green light heading westbound sneaks out a little ways into the intersection in preparation of making a left-hand turn. That transition across that short distance of an east-west crossing the intersection is just too short to make a reasonable transition through there. The other components of the intersection that add to the conflicts are that we have a right turn lane, which creates a right turn lane. That in itself is okay. There's also then, as I was saying, the eastbound traffic that has to transition, in essence, a full lane width, which is roughly 12 feet, as they're crossing a 3-lane roadway section. And you can see how that puts them in close proximity to anybody coming westbound to make a left-hand turn. And then in the midst of all that, we have a bicycle lane that's also making a similar transition as the eastbound vehicles. The reason that becomes even more complicated in this process is there is a tendency for some of these vehicles that are heading east and turning south to want to get into this far lane. Mm-hmm. Now, the traffic codes say you are supposed to turn into the near lane on a one-way road, but as we know, a lot of people in practice don't necessarily do that, so they swing all the way out into this far lane, which means they're traversing some of that bicycle, what would be the bicycle lane, in the process of making that corner. So it creates a pinch point right in here where bicycles, in essence, are squeezed between vehicles that are making a right-hand turn lane and vehicles that are trying to make a quick transition from this spot on the roadway to this spot on the roadway, all the while avoiding potential left turn conflict, traffic coming in the other direction. So in short, it's just a bit of a mess. We'd like to resolve some of that and clean this up so that we don't have as many potential conflicts at this location. So along that line, we've looked at a couple of possibilities on how to get there, and we started this actually some time ago and then brought it forward to the committee to consider back in about July of this year, starting with 2 alternatives. And this one is one we've called Alternative 1. It was the one that at the time was preferred by staff and suggested as the one that we would like to pursue, and I'll take you through some of the reasons for that. The concept here is that the eastbound lane would transition as you approach the intersection of Jackson Street. You can see here this hatched area represents the offset of that existing roadway to the south, which then allows it to, through a continuation of the transition, line up better with the continuation of the eastbound lane as you head east to 6th Street and avoid the conflict with that left turning pocket coming westbound. Along with that, of course, the bicycle lane would follow the same transition. You can say, well, it lines up across here. And then the right-hand turn lane was shifted quite a ways south. And the reason for that was because this star right here represents the location of the existing traffic signal pole. And we were hoping to avoid having to move that pole because that adds a significant cost and complication to the project. So this particular alternative, one, included a traffic island at this location, and within that island would be the traffic signal pole and potentially the power pole that's also located just next to the signal pole. This one requires the largest area of right-of-way that we'd have to acquire from the parcel to the south, which belongs to the URA. It's about 30,000 or 3,060 feet, roughly. Does create probably the best traffic flow in terms of lining things up. And just a quick couple of images here of how that traffic movement flows better as you work your way through this type of alignment, fewer conflicts. The second alternative did not use the island, so you see the island's gone away here, and essentially just shifted the 3 lanes to the south, so through lane, bicycle lane, and right turn lane, an equal distance, requires a relocation of that signal to a new location somewhere in here behind the sidewalk, so there's an added cost to the project if we do this. But the right-of-way need goes down as far as the area, so that's an advantage. The travel lanes and the flow of traffic through the intersection for the vehicles are still good. The bicycles certainly is much improved, and we're less likely to see the conflict and the squeeze happening here, even with vehicles perhaps that are swinging further out than they should, just because the angle here is reduced quite a bit. So those were the options that were brought forward to the committee back in July. They were also, I believe, presented at one point to the URA board, met with kind of a lukewarm reception, if you will. So we thought, well, okay, let's look a little further into this and see if we can come up with some better options. So this is option alternative number 3, we're calling it, the new version, if you will, and it's a little bit different drawing. So the concept here is that we would still shift these 3 lanes to the south, similar to alternative 2, but not go as far. So instead of shifting the lanes 10 or 12 feet to the south, we're only shifting them 5 or 6 feet to the south. So essentially a half lane width shift to the south. Now that still leaves a little bit of the lane offset with a little bit of the lane for the left turn heading westbound, but the transition is much more gentle and actually falls within the parameters that are established through the design guidelines that we use for designing roadway systems. So for this speed of roadway, that amount of horizontal transition as you cross an intersection falls within those requirements and guidelines. So that's an acceptable alignment. So this would, in essence, kind of meet us halfway, give us an improved traffic flow from west to east, reduce the conflict potential between the opposing directions of traffic, also improve the situation with the flow, I'll zoom in a little bit, the flow of traffic for the bicycles and the turning movement, again represented here by the green bicycle lane and the right turn lane, because the angle here is reduced, the transition is not as sharp across the intersection, the vehicles are not as likely to swerve as rapidly to the right as they were as they are today, and so we believe that would reduce the potential for conflict for the vehicles and the bicycles, and then certainly reduce that conflict with the opposing left turn lane. Does it avoid it entirely? No, it does not, but I think it's certainly an improved situation and one that we believe would make it a better intersection for all modes of traffic that are passing through. Also in this configuration, we've kept the curb line at such a location that we should be able to keep the traffic signal pole in its current location. So that keeps the cost down. We don't have to relocate the traffic signal pole. The power pole that's there either would remain or potentially, if the URA pursues taking the power underground, it could potentially go away. In either case, we could leave the traffic signal pole where it is, work the curb line around it as it exists. We would change the crosswalk configurations a little bit to a double crosswalk on either side of that pole, working their way north-south and east-west. This one also includes a little different perspective on the sidewalk. Previous examples had a 5-foot wide walk. This example has a 10-foot wide sidewalk, which is in keeping with the theme that we've established in this area. So what we've done on College Street, what we've done on Jackson to the north of this site in front of the EMSI building, we're attempting to do on Jackson in front of the Jimmy John's site. So it is a little different in that perspective. Because of that, the right-of-way, it falls in between the other two alternatives. Okay. So in summary, these are the three alternatives we looked at. Number one, with the traffic islands, initially a little over 3,000 square feet of area that would be required to be obtained from the URA. Does not relocate the pole, but has a 5-foot sidewalk. Option 2, the smallest of the area needs, does require the pole relocation, so higher cost attached to that. Again, the 5-foot walk, neither of those meet what is now our current approach for sidewalks in this area. And then number 3, which is our new preferred alternative from a staff perspective, right-of-way needs just a little under 2,400 square feet, does not require pole relocation, and does include the 10-foot wide sidewalk. Now, this third concept was presented to the board of the renewal agency. It has met with some favor, is my understanding. And so we are here today to ask that the council provide us your thoughts on whether or not this is something that we should be pursuing with the Urban Renewal Agency in terms of acquiring right-of-way, and then ultimately moving this on to a project that would construct the improvements as we've proposed them to be.
Dan?
Les, in committee, if I remember right, wasn't this intersection, doesn't it have the highest crash data in the city according to ITD?
That is what I reported at the committee meeting. We just received some updates to those, to that data. This one is out actually now number 4 within the city. There are, the highest one's actually now out at Perimeter Drive.
Oh, really?
And State Highway 8, and then 3rd and Jackson, 3rd and Washington, I believe in that order, and this intersection now at 6th and
Still
Jackson.
top 5, though.
Still top 5.
Tom?
I was on the Urban Renewal Agency when the first 2 proposals were presented, and I'm much happier about this third proposal, so that seems consistent with my perception of those different proposals and how it fit in with our intended use, or the URA's intended use for that property.
Well, and I agree. I think this particular option, particularly with the frontage improvements that now is shown, certainly meets more of the intent of what that development of that property may be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it just, in general, is a better fix for a lot of situations and fits better with all the different competing interests that are occurring in that area.
And as a bicycle user in that intersection, it seems like it would work well there too. For that.
Are you?
Yeah, I was going to paraphrase a little bit from the URA board, and Gary can rein me back if I go astray here. But the URA board was quite in favor of option number 3, and were very willing to negotiate with the city over the parameters of the need for the land and kind of shared interests that can be covered both. And we're even willing to discuss the issue of foregoing payment in terms of improvements to the street frontages through there in sort of a barter system. So the URA board was quite in favor of option number 3, because option number 1 with the traffic island out front blocks the entire use of that welcoming parcel to the whole Legacy Crossing area, and so the traffic island was to be discouraged substantially. And number 2 seemed to be tight. Number 3 seems to be the Goldilocks moment on this one, and really seems to serve a lot of needs simultaneously.
Gary, you've been doing the presentations with the URA board. Do you have anything you'd like to add above what Art said?
I think Art did a great job of paraphrasing what feeling of the board is. The URA has indicated they're quite willing to discuss with the city to try and make that a safer intersection and move ahead with the plans for Legacy Crossing as well as the Legacy Crossing overlay zone, and get that area of the city developed in the way that was intended. So look forward to sitting down and working out a deal with the city.
So the action that the council takes is they're not really approving anything, it's just a willingness to cooperate in conjunction with meeting with the URA and...
Yeah, if I may. The purpose of the discussion is to determine whether or not city council wants to proceed. If you do want to proceed, then we'll set up a meeting with the URA and the city to talk about exactly what it means to both entities and look at alternatives. If it's not a cost per square foot, then if there's an opportunity for some joint development, something like that, certainly explore all of those options. And the URA, as the landowner in the city, will have to come to some sort of an agreement at some point.
Okay, Walter?
In that vein, Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion that we endorse alternative number 3 as presented tonight and indicate our interest in pursuing negotiations with the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency to acquire additional right-of-way on 6th Street at this intersection.
Second.
Okay, Walter made a motion to accept number 3 that Les presented. John seconded the motion to be in talks, negotiations with the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency to acquire additional right-of-way on 6th Street for the third alternative alignment. Everybody clear with that? We'll start with the roll with Art.
Aye.
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 Okay, we'll move forward with it. Thank you very much, Les.